Hello and welcome to Otterwood Cottage, where we're building a brand new small holding in the heart of the Lincolnshire countryside. I'm Emma and we're delighted to have you along with us. We are enjoying some much needed and very well received rain today, Sunday, and so I am getting on with some jobs in the conservatory, a little bit of pricking out, a little bit of planting of our next lot of seeds, and a little bit later I'm hoping to do some tidying up in the polytunnel. So I thought whilst I was cracking on with bits and bobs, I would bring you along with us, show you what we're planting, what we're sowing, and catch you up on what's been going on this week. So my first job this morning, I've got a couple of things to do. One is to plant some new seeds, and one is to do some pricking out of some seeds that I planted last week. So if I show you first of all the seeds that I'll be pricking out. So these were old seed, and so I sowed them pretty thickly in these cell trays on the basis that I wasn't expecting a huge amount of germination. But as you can see, the vast majority of them have done really well, with one or two exceptions. So the lamb's lettuce, unsurprisingly for old lettuce seed, hasn't done anything at all. The radish I will leave as multi-sown, and the pak choy next to it, I'm going to leave these as multi-sown. These are going to go outside in between the garlic, when ready for when the garlic is harvested. Similarly with the swede, I'm going to leave that multi-sown, but the quick heading calabrese, I'm going to prick these out, and I'm going to prick out the purple sprouting broccoli. So along with the pricking out, today and yesterday have mostly been about correcting some mistakes that we've made this season. I had noticed that there were a few staples that we usually grow quite a lot of that for one reason or another this year we hadn't planted enough. Partly I think because I was perhaps relying on older seed which didn't germinate as well as it might have. Also because we planted out early and then we got caught, as you know from previous videos, particularly with the chaos beds. We probably sowed those too early, and then some of what we had included in the chaos bed seed packets didn't germinate, particularly the lettuce, which is one of the things I'm going to correct today. And also just because I underestimated the size of the space that we now have and what we'd like to put in it, but also underestimated moving from being just the two of us to being a five-person household. My daughter's here sometimes, not always, a 4 or 5 person household, and therefore how much we want to have available to us to store through the winter. We're not aiming for self-sufficiency. I think I've said before, we're not in a position or to spend the time and energy that's needed for full self-sufficiency, but we are aiming for as much as possible to come from our own land. And so there were a few things that we were behind on. So one of those things is beetroot, and that fell into all 3 of those potential mistakes. So I had some old seed beetroots. I had also used beetroot in the chaos beds, and some have come up. So there is a little bit of beetroot out there, but not as much as I would like. And some of it got caught by the seed, but also just we all love beetroot, so we could do with some more of that, both for fresh eating and for preserving and storing. So one of the things I have ordered, which have arrived in my seed order from Real Seeds, is 4 different types of beetroot. There's 5 packets there because one of them has got 2 packets. I don't know whether I accidentally bought 2 or whether Real Seeds have just sent me a spare. Either way, exciting to have extra. So the one I've got 2 packets of is the sanguina beetroot. That's the kind of typical blood red beetroot that you're probably most used to seeing. I've also got a Loki Detroit 5 red beetroot, and then I've got some white albino beetroot, which we've grown before in the past and really enjoyed, and Bilic bicolour beetroot, which is a bit like the chioggia, I don't know how you say it, chioggia, the stripy red and white beetroot. This is a version of that, and it's also one of their crowdsourced testing ones, so they look for feedback on these to know whether they want to keep growing them and selling them. So some lovely varieties of beetroot there. I'm going to keep succession sowing these. One of the things I have also been doing this week is reading this lovely little book, Grow Food in Your Polytunnel, which came with our polytunnel and I haven't yet had a chance to look at, just to think about, it seems mad at the beginning of July to be thinking about our overwintering crops, but now is the time to start thinking about making sure you have the seed ready and available to plant towards the end of July, August and through September, ready to have crops in the polytunnel through the winter. And beetroot and salad are some of the crops that we're planning to put into the polytunnel over the winter, along with some other brassicas. So some kind of future planning going on, as well as correcting a lack of produce right now. The lettuces, we're really short on just leaf lettuce. So we have been eating lettuces from the garden, but they have been leaf beet chard, the tops of the beetroot that we do have, the broad bean tops and the pea shoots. So just nipping out the tops of our peas. Delicious salads, really, and the goosefoot lettuce, which is growing like bilio in the polytunnel and needs to come out. One of the things I need to do today is to take that out. But what we did notice was the lettuce seed that I had pretty much used all of that in the chaos beds, and the lettuce hasn't come up in those chaos beds. I think partly old seed, partly the cold weather. So I've gone a bit mad on lettuce leaf, because this is something that we can more or less keep succession sowing in small amounts and grow from now pretty much, I would imagine, with the polytunnel right through the winter. And so I've got a good selection: winter marvel winter lettuce, a organic Morton's secret mixed lettuce. I'm really excited about that one. So if you go on the Real Seeds website and have a look, it is a genuine mix of all types of lettuce, but they look delicious and yummy. Roden red and green ruffled lettuce, some organic Optima green butterhead lettuce. Butterhead lettuces are my favourite. A Maximo giant iceberg lettuce for some nice crunch. An emerald oak leaf lettuce, and an Australian yellow leaf lettuce, which is a loose leaf lettuce. So tons of lettuce there. I'm going to sow just a tiny bit of each today, and these will go into again when the garlic comes out, when that's going to be quite a big bed with not a lot to go in it at the moment. So between the beetroot and some of the bits that I'm pricking out and the lettuce, we should refill that bed. The other bits that I've got to plant, but these are going to be direct sown. Hopefully, if there's a break in the weather, I will do that today straight outside, because a rainy day is a perfect day to be direct sowing. I've got some cultivated rocket, again for our salad bowls, some more giant red carrot. Some of that has germinated in the brassica cage, but I'm going to pop some of that outside as well, so we've got plenty of options for carrots. And then some Jacob's Cattle Gold. You may remember if you saw a previous video that the Jacob's Cattle are obviously the most delicious bush beans, and so all of the ones I'd previously planted, the whole lot been decimated by pigeons and slugs. So I'm going to try replanting those and hope that we do get a later harvest from those. They are drying beans, so hopefully the season will last long enough. And then the last group of seeds I have bought is a real gamble. It's much too late to be planting them, really. I think I've mentioned on a previous video, but I'm really disappointed by the lack of squash that I grew this year. Now that is entirely just my own fault, not buying enough, and that's a real shame. So I have bought some more, but we are, 3 or 4, maybe even 5 weeks late to even be thinking about planting squash at this time. It is much, much too late. I'm not really expecting any of these to fruit, which sounds ridiculous. Why would you buy seeds and plant them, sow them and not expect them to fruit? Well, for 2 reasons. One, I'm going to experiment with putting some of these into the polytunnel. So maybe one of each variety into the polytunnel. They can, because we're starting them late and they're going to take a while to come on, my kind of hope is that when they start to get bigger and vine, it will be when we're starting to take out the melons, and so they can kind of vine along the floor, or potentially even up some stringing. We'll see how it goes. But I'm hoping that we might just get a long enough season in the polytunnel to get some fruit from these, and if not, it's not the end of the world. I haven't lost anything other than the cost of 4 seed packets. But the other reason is I have got another tray of sweet corn which needs to go out, and I could do with some more squash for ground cover in between the sweet corn, particularly as the sweet corn is going into an area that is just the bare earth. We've not got any compost over there. And so what we figured was, worst case scenario, even if these don't fruit, they will vine, they will provide ground cover, and they'll have served a purpose. And then at the end of the season, if we haven't had any squash from them, it's not the end of the world. It's lots of lovely material for the compost, and they will have helped to suppress the weeds for the corn. So not the end of the world if we don't get anything from them. Much too late. I wouldn't recommend trying to sow squash now, but let's give it a go and see what happens. So the varieties I have are chestnut compact winter squash, a garbo winter squash, a Miss Sophie pink mini winter squash, and a table queen acorn winter squash. So we're gonna pop all of those in. I'm gonna risk planting the whole lot of each packet and just see how we go. So that's our plan for sowing today. I'm going to start by pricking out the brassicas that I've planted, and while I'm doing that, I'll tell you about another mistake that I tried to fix yesterday, which was to sort out some very sad looking peppers, which you can now see behind me. So let me grab those, I'll start pricking out, and I'll tell you all about the pepper mistakes that I tried to fix yesterday. Okay, so where to start with the story of the peppers? So as you know, if you've been watching for a while, our peppers are split into 3 different places: the polytunnel, in here in the conservatory, and outside by the side of the house. And the ones in the conservatory were going great guns. I sow my peppers and chilies on the 1st of January, and that is what I've done for several years now. That's been a bit of a tradition to New Year's Day sowing of my pepper seeds. But what I've not had before is a conservatory in which to grow them, and so that part was completely new. And what we've discovered is the ones in the polytunnel, other than the one that went into transplant shock and died within a couple of days, all of the others are doing brilliantly and looking really well. And the ones in here were looking absolutely fabulous. They had started fruiting early, they were looking nice and bushy, really healthy. And then all of a sudden, or it felt like it was all of a sudden, some of them just started to decline. So it started with one of the varieties, I think it was the padrons, no, it was the jalapenos, just suddenly started to look really sad. All the leaves fell off. They had fruited. There was plenty of jalapeno peppers, little tiny jalapeno peppers on the plant. So it was fruiting, but just the leaves went yellow and fell off, and I was looking at the watering schedule and that all looked right. I was following what I'd done before. The soil in the compost in the bags felt to me like it was the right level of dampness. It wasn't too dry, it wasn't too wet, and so it was all a bit of a mystery. And it's where lack of experience and naivety of growing in a new space, and just general lack of experience. Although we've been growing, we had the allotment for 3 years before coming here. That's no time at all really, and so many things, so many different types of pests and issues that you won't have thought of will come up. And so I didn't do anything about it as quickly as I should have done, and by yesterday they really were, some of them were looking in a really sorry state, and it just looked like we'd lose them completely. So I finally pulled my finger out and did some proper research into what might be going on, looked much more closely at the plants, and I think 2 mistakes made. One is I hadn't fully spotted that there were signs of little spiders' webs on some of the plants, and that is, along with the yellowing and the other issues we'd had, is almost definitely signs of spider mite. Now, I've never had spider mite before. I didn't know what to look for. I didn't know I didn't even really know it was a thing. I think I have heard people mention it before, but didn't really know much about it at all. So apparently that is very common when you are growing things like peppers, chilies, tomatoes indoors, and you need to keep a close eye on it and make sure that if there are signs of spider mite, you are getting rid of them as soon as possible. You can blast them off, you can wipe them off, you can use neem oil, you can use a variety of, if you want to use pesticides and things, you can use those. We choose not to use those. But there are lots of ways that you can deal with spider mite, and I just wasn't quick enough to A, recognise it, and B, do anything about it. And I think also what I hadn't recognised is when I have grown peppers before, and we have every year grown peppers for several years, but we were a kind of victim of them doing as well as they did, in that they had grown much, much larger than any peppers I'd grown before. And that was partly probably because they're varieties I haven't always necessarily grown, and so I didn't know how large they'd get, but also because of the fact that they are indoors, in the warm, in a very regulated temperature, and so they have just done better than anything I might have grown in the past in a polytunnel or greenhouse. And therefore, what I hadn't considered is that because they've grown so well and got so large, the compost was exhausted quicker than it might have been for peppers I'd grown in the past. And so what I needed to have done really is, although I had fed them, and you've seen, I think, probably the short I did and a couple of other bits on the food I use for tomatoes, the homemade food I use for tomatoes and peppers. I don't think I'd been using that frequently enough, or probably enough volume-wise of the amount of feed I was giving them, and I think the compost had got exhausted. So a combination of those two things left some of the peppers looking, and the chilies looking super sad. In particular, it was the jalapenos, the organic lipstick, and not the padrons, what's the other one? That didn't do particularly well. What's this one? The Zitavias. So, what did we do about it? Well, I harvested all the peppers that were on the plant, and I have preserved those in a couple of ways. So the Zitavias, which are the ones that are used traditionally to make paprika, I have dried out. I have dehydrated in the Ninja dehydrator. There's another story there about whether I should invest in a decent dehydrator or not, but that's probably for another video. So I've dried those out to make our own paprika. The padron peppers I harvested, so the Zitavia peppers were all ripe, which was great. So they were able to be harvested and immediately dried. The padron peppers I harvested in whatever state they were in, because padrons typically are harvested while green, so they're not usually, you don't normally wait completely until they're red. Some of them had started to turn red, and I have preserved those in oil, ready for when we want to eat them, and they will very simply be salted and then griddled or popped on a barbecue until they blister and eaten whole. And they are absolutely delicious that way. It was always the way we'd intended to eat them, so we've not lost anything by harvesting them now. And they are the ones that 1 in 10 of them are super hot, so there's a bit of a kind of Russian roulette that goes on with padron peppers as well. So they're ready to be cooked and eaten when we're ready to do so. And then I chopped back, some more brutally than others, the pepper stalks to just above a leaf node, cleared off any awful looking leaves that were yellow, and I gave them a really deep water, took them outside, gave them a really deep water outside, and then fed them with a really good feed of my liquid fertiliser, homemade liquid fertiliser. And I'm going to keep a really even closer eye on the watering schedule moving forward, making sure that I'm only watering when the top 2 or 3 inches of soil has dried right out, so we're not over or under watering them. So what we've ended up with are some plants that, I mean, interestingly, the chilies, the rainbow and the prairie fire chilies had both avoided the spider mite and are still looking really healthy and prolific. So they haven't really been affected. All they needed was water and a feed. And the others have had this kind of slightly brutal chopping back treatment. Now we are still quite early in the season, so there is half a chance that we will still continue to get harvests from them. There is time yet for them to fight back from my brutal haircut and give me some more fruit. But if they don't, it is not the end of the world. They don't owe me anything. I've had a harvest from each of them. I have learned a valuable lesson on what I would do differently, and I'll explain what that is in just a second. And also we have others in the polytunnel and out the front of the house, although the ones out the front of the house aren't doing quite so well as the ones in the polytunnel. So there's plenty of chilies and peppers still to come. Nothing lost other than a little bit of pride for not being more on top of them when I needed to be. But as I say, some valuable lessons learned. So I think, what will I do differently? What will I do differently next year? I will still plant them. So one of the things I could do is sow them later. So I think that they possibly got leggy and exhausted the compost, partly because we did plant them so early and brought them on so well. And of course, then you're kind of dealing with the fact that you're having to make sure you're looking after them a bit more carefully with the compost exhausting and so on. But I don't want to not plant them on the 1st of January because it is a lovely tradition. It's something we really enjoy doing, but also they have done really well. Had I been more on the board and looked after them better, I think that shouldn't prevent us from doing that early sowing. So one of the options might have been to sow later, but I am still going to sow on the 1st of January, and maybe next year I'll be talking to you saying I'm not going to do that anymore, but let's see. But what I am going to do differently is, first of all, I'm going to do a lot more pinching out so that they bush up rather than go leggy. So keeping an eye on when they start to get a bit taller, being a little bit more heavy-handed with the pinching out, a little bit braver with the pinching out, so that hopefully they will bush up much more and have more leaves and less fruit early on. And that's the other thing I'm going to do, as well as pinching out, also making sure I'm removing the flowers for longer. I did remove flowers this year, but I did start letting them go to fruit quite early. I was excited to have some fruit coming in, and as I say, we have had some fabulous harvests, which in June is not bad going, but probably a little bit greedy with how early I let the flowers go to fruit. So I will next year continue to pinch the flowers out for a bit longer until I've got some really nice, bushy, healthy looking plants that have spent most of their energy building a really good root structure. And then the other thing I'll do is just keep an even closer eye, a better eye on the feeding, recognising that because they're going longer in the season and because they're getting bigger in this kind of temperature controlled, light controlled to an extent space, they will probably need feeding from earlier in their cycle and more often than I've been used to doing. So some really good lessons learned. I think we may probably see some of those completely give up the ghost. Some of them they've still got fresh growth on them, so it's not definitely the end of the road for them. But if we don't get any more from them, it's not the end of the world. Right, I have pricked out how many? 6, 12, 18, 24, 30 quick heading calibries there, and there are still quite a lot in the original tray, but I think I'm just going to leave those there, let these, see which ones of these do best, and then sacrifice the rest, because 30 plants for now is more than enough to keep us going. So next I'm going to work on the purple sprouting, but I'm going to need a new tray for that. So I'll just get on with that now. Break in the weather, so I have popped outside quickly to get these 3 bits that I want to direct sow in the ground. So first of all, I'm going to be putting in some second sowing of the Jacob's Cattle Gold Bush drying bean. So as you can see, this is where I planted the originals, and for some reason all of these beans were planted at exactly the same time, had been treated in exactly the same way, and yet these have been absolutely decimated. So either there's something going on with the soil here. I think more likely these are just particularly delicious, and so the slugs and the pigeons have had a good go at these and left the others alone. I mean, I should be grateful that they've left the others alone, I suppose, but if these are so delicious, then I feel like I'd quite like to have some. So Otter, hello, brave boy. Now this is very brave. Otter has been terrified of coming into the garden ever since he had a little bit of an incident with the electric fence, bless him. And so he normally refuses to come in. So this is very brave. Well done. Hello. Hello, you're going to help? Come on then, sit to the side, off the bed. Good boy. Right, so let's get some of these in, and they are so beautiful. I just finished getting the seeds planted, sown rather, inside. Now, those 2 trays took me the best part of 2 hours. Am I the slowest gardener in the world, or does this stuff just take you a really long time as well? I don't know, it just seems to take me forever. I mean, I'm not complaining, I quite enjoy it. I was sat listening to a nice audio book, and I mean, admittedly I was talking to you as well, so there is a little bit of time spent setting up the camera and recording what I'm saying to you, but I don't really, as you can probably tell, my videography skills are not excellent. I don't spend a great deal of time setting up, getting angles right, worrying about lighting, any of that. I just kind of plug and play. I mean, for this kind of channel, I think that's probably fine. It's more about what you're hearing and seeing than the quality of the video recording, I think. Tell me if I'm wrong. So I don't spend a great deal of time on that. So I don't know why it takes me so long. Maybe this is just how long things take. You tell me, how long would it take you to sow 2 big trays of seeds like that? 2 hours about right, or am I really, really slow and faffing unnecessarily with something? Right, beans are going in. The ground is lovely and soft. It has been so dry, even with us coming out and watering, trying to automate some of the watering with the sprinkler. You can stand here watering for what feels like ages, and then you put your fingers into the soil and it's dry a couple of centimetres below the soil. So it's been really hard to keep on top of it where we've had the drought. Now, I'm not complaining. I love the hot weather, and I would much rather it that way than freezing cold or miserable rain all summer. However, today's showers, and it has been the perfect kind of rain because it's been showering on and off, so it's not been a deluge to just wash everything away and not penetrate the soil, but it's also not just been a drizzle and we're due some more. So perfect time to be planting straight into the ground. And look, the soil is nice and damp. Getting my fingers nice and mucky, which the last few times we've been out, the last couple of weeks, you can stick your hand in the soil and it just comes away as dust. If you can even get your hand in the soil. You found a puddle to drink, Ots. Nice. Right, I think I'm going to stick in this bed because, as you can see, I've got a space there and a space there where I haven't got anything in. So I'm going to go with a couple of rows of carrots here in between my peas and these beans, and I'm gonna just move that, whatever that is, doesn't look very pleasant, out of the way, and use just this bit of stick to give me a bit of a channel down here. And I'll see here it's a bit drier, not quite so damp. That's sufficient there. And another channel here. It's interesting, that's damper. Must have just been, for some reason, that bit's a bit hydrophobic. And then in my back pocket, I'm going to pop the rest of the giant red carrot in. Now that was one of the things, carrot seeds were one of the things I learned the hard lesson early on as a gardener, that even though you quite often get more seeds than you think you can possibly use, absolutely no point saving them because they don't do well a second year. So there's tons of seeds in here, but I'm going to sow them nice and thick across the 2 rows and just get rid of a lot of them. So I've already got a couple of rows in the brassica cage which have had kind of mixed germination, I would say. There's a few come along, mostly at the back of the row, not so many towards the front of the bed. So I'm going to sow these nice and thick because the germination wasn't brilliant in there, and just see how we get on. Very slapdash, very kind of unsophisticated, and then just cover them up. And what I might just do, although I'm a bit worried about slugs now it's been raining, shall I or shan't I? Let me explain. So one of the things you can do to help with germination of your carrot seedlings is to place a piece of wood across the top of them, and it just holds the moisture in. But that is also a brilliant way to trap slugs, and given that the slugs will probably make an appearance today because we've had the rain, I think in hindsight I won't do that. I will just let the rain do its job, and then if it dries up over the next few days I'll come back and pop some wood down over the top there. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And then my final little sowing, I'm going to put over here. I'm going to do a similar couple of rows of rocket. Now this was, there is some rocket over in the chaos bed, but it bolted really quickly. And went quite bitter very quickly too. It actually tasted like wild rocket rather than cultivated rocket. It had that kind of slightly bitter taste, which I don't completely dislike, but it wasn't necessarily what we were going for by buying the cultivated rocket. What have you got? What have you found? What is it? So hopefully I should start to see this bed. What have you got, Ots? Can I see? What's it? What is it? Let me just go and see what that is. What have you got? That was really funny. It was a tomato from the polytunnel that he's very carefully taken off a plant. He hasn't punctured the skin or anything, and then carried it very carefully around there and dropped it at the back door for us. So he was harvesting tomatoes for us, obviously. Yeah, 10-month-old puppies, they're brilliant. But you have to keep an eye on them all the time, or be prepared to lose a shoe or a tomato. Right, how are we doing for time? Speaking of tomatoes, let's go and have a look in the polytunnel. Oh, and while I've got you, let me turn you around. Those lazy housewife beans that I'd written off are proving me wrong. Look, they're starting to appear. Not doing much climbing, but there are some beans there. Right, come with me. Oh, you're on the wonk. Never mind. I'll settle you down in a sec. Right, here is the polytunnel in its full glory. And I mentioned earlier the giant goosefoot. Let me bring you back shorter. Look, there's the chipper in here. We had to bring it in when it started to rain the other day. That has just got out of control. I mean, it's looking fabulous. I'm going to harvest some from it for our tea tonight, and then I think I'm going to take it out and give it to the chickens, because we have got much more of this growing elsewhere. And down here is a cucumber that is trying to grow and is getting all caught up in it. So, although interestingly, that cucumber is doing better than that one. So maybe this is providing some useful shade. I don't know. This is the corn I was talking about. It's really got to go out. It's got so big in here. So hopefully the squash I've planted today will help us to provide some cover for that. And then what else have we got going on in here? What else was I telling you about? So you can see the peppers are doing well, much less, certainly no spider mite, and much less of that leaf drop that we were seeing, not quite so leggy. The jalapenos actually are both a bit leggy, but that might be to do with the start they had. But they're definitely doing better than the ones inside, and these are just magical. Look at these sweet spirals. They turn, the colour turns. You can probably see it a bit on this one, and it kind of travels down the fruit. It's so pretty. They look amazing. Can't wait. And the other thing that's really exciting that's coming along in here, look, we have aubergines coming. That's quite, I mean, that one, that's ready to come in. That is a good sized aubergine, as big as my hand. And there's another one in this plant which I'm not sure I'm going to be able to show you because it's right around the back. The basil has suddenly shot up. They were the fresh new ones I planted. These were our originals, and they didn't look like they were doing anything, and then they've suddenly shot up. And then these dragon's egg cucumbers, which are really, really delicious, a really delicate flavour, they're starting to come along. We've had one cucumber from these plants. They're not quite as far ahead. But that's okay, everything's doing well. See this one, nothing on this one. And that's the same as these, I think. So fascinating how they come on at different times and speeds. Plenty of tomatoes coming along. The tomatillos, hello! I wouldn't eat that one. I wouldn't steal from that one. It is hot. You good boy. Are you a good boy? Otter. Hello, darling. He's a good pup, aren't you? You're a good pup. His bestie Ava is away at the minute with my mum and stepdad. He's on his Todd, which is probably why he's venturing out here, even though he's frightened because he hasn't got his bestie. Oh, the other exciting thing to show you. Look at this. A watermelon! So exciting. And then we've got some sweet melons growing as well. So it's coming along lovely in here, really looking fab. I was started to show you before I got distracted by Otter, the tomatillos, just starting. I wonder if you can, I don't want to, they're just starting to grow their fruit inside. I can't show you. Inside these lanterns there's a little tiny fruit growing. And the peppers, chilies, everything doing fab. I'm really happy with how it's all turned out in here. And I need to come and do another sauce. Thank you for those that are commenting on the sauce video. I know it is dead simple. And that's kind of the point, is it wasn't anything fancy. Because the reality is most of our day-to-day isn't fancy. We're just getting on with harvesting stuff. I've just spotted more aubergine in here coming along nicely. I feel a moussaka in our very near future. Delicious. That was a bit of an impromptu polytunnel tour. I wasn't really expecting to do that today, but as I was out here, I thought I'd bring you in. Growing's just amazing, isn't it? This is the best time of year. Just every time you come out, there's something new to see. And genuinely, as I'm sharing with you, I'm seeing new things myself. How lucky are we to be able to grow stuff in our own space? If if you get the chance to do it and you're not already, I thoroughly recommend it.